Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Samsaradava Nalalida Loka Naya karunya gana ganatam praptasya kalyana gurunanavasya vande gurashi charanaravrindam praptasya kalyana gurunanavasya vande gurashi Vande Gurashi Charanaravinda Vande Gurashi Charanaravinda Mahaprabhu ki Tananita Gita Vaditramadhyam Manasurasena Mahaprabhu ki Tananita Gita Vaditramadhyam Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Taranga Bhajo Vande Gurashi Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanama Dhiramarjanado Shri Vigrahara Juktasya bhaktamsa niyunjatopi Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Chaturvidhashi Bhagavat Prasado Satvana Triptam Hari Bhakta Sangha Chaturvidhashi Bhagavat Prasado Satvana Triptam Kridvaiva Tripte Bhajata Shadeva Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Shirarikama Davayorapara Madhurya Leela Gunarupa Namna Shirarikama Madhurya Leela Pratikshana Danalalupasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Ne kunja yuno ratikeli sidhai Jajali viri jokti apekshaniya Ne kunja yuno Satrati daksha ati balavasya Vande Gurashi charanara vrindam. Sakchadhari dena shamasta shashri ruktas tathava gata eva sabhi. Kintu prabhoja priya eva tasya Vande Gurashi charanara vrindam. Yasya prasada bhagavat prasado Yasya prasadam nagati kutapi Yasya prasada bhagavat prasado Yasya prasada Dayam stovam tasya yasatrin sandhyam Vande Gurashi charanara vrindam. Vande Gurashi charanara vrindam. Vande Gurashi charanara vrindam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Nama Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pachatari Shatarine Namaste Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Nama Krishna Jadavaye Nama Hare Yara Jadavaye Madhavaye Kesavaye Nama Gopal Govinda Ram Shmadhu Sudha Giridhari Gopina Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattara Guna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasara Guna Shri Radha Nila Madhava Radha Nila Madhava Radha Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadrama Jaya Sudarshan Chakra Jaya Sitaram Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Jaya Lakshmana Hanuman Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Nitai Gaur Hari Bo Hari Bo Hari Bo Nitai Gaur Hari Bo Hari Bo Hari Bo जय विश्वपार परमहंस प्रभुपादाचार्य सूत्र शिष्य महाराज डिवाइन ग्रेस अभोचरविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन प्रतिष्ठा विविधि संस्थापक आचार्य वैष्णव शिरोमणि पतित पावन श्रील प्रभुपाद जी महाराज की जय। श्री गौर्य गुरु वर्गापति उद्धार की जय। श्री रूप सनातन भक्त रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भक्त दास गुण सतगुरु स्वामी प्रभु की जय। नामाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर जी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसरि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। जय परम दयाल से नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय। जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद लक्ष्मण गुरु श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि मावन नाय बताकार की जय। कुलकेर प्रमधान हरि नाम संकीर्तन जय की जय। जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। बृहद निदांग ट्रांसडेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय। श्री ब्रजभूम वृंदावन मथुर धाम की जय। तिलो शिव श्री राधा नीलमाधव की जय। श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्र धाम की जय। परम करुण श्री श्री गौर अनिताय की जय। श्री पुरुषोत्तम चित्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु देव सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय। सीताराम लक्ष्मण भक्त हनुमान जी की जय। श्री लक्ष्मी लक्ष्मी देव भगवान की जय। जगंगा में जमुना माय की जय। तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री मथुरा रानी की जय। समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। निताय गौर हरि नामाचार्य श्रीदास ठाकुर चिरुभावती महोत्सव की जय। All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories, all glories, all glories. Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Anybody want to sing that?
Namaste Narasimhaya Tala Tala Tadayine Hiranyakashi Purvaksha Silatanka Nakalaye Ito Nisinga Parato Nisinga
Yato yami tato nasimha
Jato Jato Jami Tato Nisinga
Kahir nasimho ridaye nasimho
Dair Nisinga Daye Nisinga
Narasimha madim sharanam vapadye
Narasimha Madim Sharanam Prabhade
Avakara kamalavare nagam Adbhuta singam Dalita hiranyakashipu Tanubindam Deshavadita nararirupa Sajagam
Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada,
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Shri Shri Bhakti Pada Sarvina Shanakari Shingari Bhagavan Ki Jai Jai Bhakta Shrestha Prahlad Maharaj Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Hari Pramanande Hari Hari Bol Shri Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha Shrimati Tulasi Maharani
Namo Namo Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Namo
Tulasi Krishna Priyasi Namo Namo
Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Namo
Tulasi Krishna Priyasi Namo Namo
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Vilasi
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Eya Vilasi
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Vilasi
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Eya Vilasi
Sheto Maya Sharanaloy Tara Vancha Purnahoy
Mara Sharanala Taravancha
Kripa Koi Koro Tare Vrindavanavasi
Tume Kripa Pare Kara Vrindavanavasi
Moraeya Vilas Vilas Kunjeriova Nayane Heri Bosada Jugala Ruparasi
Aminaya
Hey Nivedana Taro Sakir Anugata Koro Sevadikara diye kara nijadasi. Dina Krishna dase koi Eye namora hoy.
Krishna dase koi Eye namora hoy.
Shri Radha Govinda preme sadaye navasi.
Shri Radha Govinda sadaye navasi.
Shri Radha Govinda preme sadaye navasi.
Shri Radha Govinda preme sadaye navasi.
Yani kani cha papani Brahma jati kani cha Tani tani pranashanti Pradakshina pade pade. Yani kani cha papani Brahma jati kani cha Tani tani pranashanti Pradakshina pade pade. Yani kani cha papani Brahma jati kani cha Tani tani pranashanti Pradakshina pade pade. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya, Tulsi Maharani Jaya, Tulsi Maharani Jaya, Tulsi Maharani
Jaya, Tulsi Maharani Jaya, Tulsi Maharani Jaya, Tulsi Maharani Jaya, Tulsi Maharani
Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya, Vrinda Devi Jaya, Vrinda Devi Jaya, Vrinda Devi
Jaya, Vrinda Devi.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol,
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyaye Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavatai Namo Namaha. Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrindadevi Ki Jai. O Tulsi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you has wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence in pleasure groves of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Thus within my vision, I will always behold beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavidhyams of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own man servant. This is very important and Lord is servant Krishna prayer. May I always say me Lord Shri Radha and go with the Shri Mati Tulasi Maharani. Vrindadevi Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Ki Jai. Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bhava Ija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pita Niyamita Smaranena Kara Ekadashi Nava Kripa Bhavanamati Durdai Mam Idrisham Ya Janina Nuragaha Trinadapi Sunichena Tarodapi Sahishranam Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sahari Yadharamna Jaramna Sundarim Kavitamba Jagadisham Mama Janmani Janmanishwari Bhavatar Bhaktirai Tuki Tvai Vainandatam Linga Varitama Visave Mahamudu Vinayata Bhagavim Kajastikali Sarisham Devotayam Nayanam Nurudan Shudharaya Vadanam Gadgadardaya Gira Puradahe Nichitam Bhagavadatam Grahane Bhavishyati Yugaitam Nimeshena Chakshusha Vishaitam Sunyaditam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahenami Asli Seva Padaratam.
Thank you, John. Which kind of stuff have all of us been for years?
Unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. But you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind. Okay. Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause of devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet some of others have fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of them. O my Lord, who is my heart is dedicated to feel the love more constantly when I chant your name. Who is my virtue cup? Only the hairs of my body stand in the hands of the situation of O Govinda, feeling your situation, I'm interested in a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes to rain,
And I am feeling all vacant.
in the world of absence.
I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so, even if he hands me my face, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before him. He is completely free to do anything and everything. He is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Chaitanya Krishnastakam Ki Jai.
There have been offenses in matter of chanting the name of the Lord that should be avoided.
Blasphemous devotees who dedicated their lives to propagating holy names of the Lord. Consider names of demigods like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma equal to our independent names of Lord Vishnu. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literature in pursuance of the Vedic version.
5.
Consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna as imagination.
6.
To give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord.
7.
To commit sinful activities from strength and chanting the holy name of the Lord.
8.
Consider chanting Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in the Vedas, fruit of activities or karma kanda.
9.
To instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name.
And 10.
10. To not have complete faith in the chanting of holy names, and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. These are some of the offenses of inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees that can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakalpatarabhyascha kripa sindhubhyevcha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha vaishnava thakur ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatani. Shrimad Bhagavatam Granth Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Janmadyasya Yato Niviyad Itaratascha Teso Vigyaswarat.
Janmadyasya yatam vayaritaratascha tesvavigyasvarat.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muyanti Yatsuryaha.
Tena Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Mojanti Jasuraya.
Tejo Varimadam Yata Vinimaya Yatra Trisargo Misha.
Tejo Varimrida Jata Vinimayo Jatra Trisargomisa.
Damna Svena Sadanirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi.
Damna Svina Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Deva.
O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of
O
God.
all-pervading personality of
I
God.
offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
Offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute
and the
truth
primeval cause of all causes,
and the primeval cause of all causes,
of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universe.
of the creation, sustenance, destruction, manifested universe.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly or indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is another cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge into the heart
the
of
original living
the
being.
original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are present to do
As one is bewildered by the illusory
as one is
representations
bewildered by the illusory representation
of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
waters and the fire lamps in the water.
Only because of him do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material
temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature,
temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of
appear factual although they are unreal.
appear factual, although they
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon
who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
who is eternally existent in the transcendental,
which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory representation of material.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute
I
truth.
meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma projita kaitravota,
Dharma prajita kaitavutra
paramo nirmatsranam satam,
brahmo nimashranam satam
vedyam vastavam atra vastu,
vedyam vastavam astavas
shivedam tapa trayon mulanam, Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite, Kim va purer Ishwaraha, Sadyo Hridi Avarudyate Tra, Krite Bihi Sususabis Takshanat. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentive and submissive hears the message of Bhagavatam,
by this culture of
by
knowledge,
this culture of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam,
Nigama kalpataru galitam phalam,
sukumukad amrita dravya samyatam,
Shukamukad amrita drava sangitam,
pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam,
Pibata bhagavatam rasamraya,
muhur aho raska bhuvibhavakaha.
Mura hura sikaha bhuviva.
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam,
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Shrimad Bhagavatam,
the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic
the
literatures.
mature fruit of the desired tree of the
It
Vedic
emanated
literature.
from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Shukadeva Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was all relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including the good
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shrimvatam Swakata
Punya
Krishna,
Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Hridyantak Stohi Abhadrani, Vidu Noti Sruhit Satam. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures, or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita, is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best wishing friend and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. Nasta prayesu bhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamasloke
Bhagavati Uttama
Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtaki.
Bhakti Bhavati Nastiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, the God naturally develops dormant transcendental
As he
knowledge.
hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the
and
devotees,
from the
he
devotees,
becomes fixed in the devotional service to the Lord.
he becomes fixed in the devotional service.
Tadarajastamo bhavo
Tadarajastamo bhava
kamalobhadayaschaye chete taranabhidam stitvam sattve prasidhati. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lust and avarice are diminished. Evam prasanna manaso bhagavat bhakti yogataha bhagavat tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Vidyate hridaya grantis, chidyante sarvasamsaya, siyante jasya karmani, justa evat manishware. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of samsayam samagram, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth, personality of Godhead. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotees in Krishna consciousness
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Shri Guru Vastika prayers ki jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it.
The Spirit Master receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just a class pours water and for the fire to extinguish it.
So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence.
So the Spiritual Master delivers the material afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lord who is in the ocean of auspicious qualities.
Chanting the holy name, dancing, singing and playing musical instruments.
Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical
The
instruments.
spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
The Spiritual Master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan moment of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind.
Because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind.
Sometimes his hair stands on end.
Sometimes his hair stands on end.
He feels quivering in his body,
He feels quivering in his body.
and tears flow from his eyes like waves.
And tears fall from eyes like waves.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna.
The Spiritual Master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha.
He also engages his disciples in such worship.
He also engages disciples in such worship.
They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments,
They dress the beautiful clothes and ornaments.
clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food. Analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavat Prasada, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava, and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert at assisting the gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavana.
The Spiritual Master is very dear because he is expert in assisting the gopis who in different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of
I
Vrindavan.
offer my most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual
The
master.
spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servitor of the Lord.
The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servitor of the Lord.
This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities.
This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities.
Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Shri Hare Krishna.
Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is the bona fide representative of Shri Hare Krishna.
By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna.
By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna.
Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement.
Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement.
Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master.
Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master.
At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master.
At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master.
Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai, Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadiradi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam.
Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadi Govinda Sarvakarana
Chintamani Prakasatma Sukalpa Vriksha
Chintamani
Laksabritesha Surabhirabhipalyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambhrama Sevyamanam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kwananta Ravinda Dalayataksham Bharhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpa Kotika Maniya Vishesha Sobham Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kala Sadvanamalya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shyamam Tribhanga Lalitam Niyata Prakasam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sudurlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Manaso Munipungamanam Sopyasti Yat Prapadasimya Vichintya Tatve Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chaitam Jagadanda Kotim Yachaktirasti Jagadanda Chayayadanta Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Baba Bhavita Diyo Manajastataiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusaha Suktaryameva Nigama Pratitaistuvanti Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavatabis Tavirya Eva Nijarupataya Kalabi Goloka Eva Nivasata Kilatma Bhuto Kalabihi Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Kalabi Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena
Premanjana Churito Bhakti Vilochane
Santak Sadeva Hideyesu Vilokayanti
Sandhasa Deva Videyeshu Vilokayanti
Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam
Yam Syama Sundaram Achintya Spunaswa
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham
Ramadi Murti Sukalani Menatistan
Ramadi Murti Sukalani Yamena
Nana Avatara Makarod Bhuvane Sukintu
Nana Vatarama Karod Bhuvaneshu Kintu
Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pumam Yo
Krishna Swayam Sambhavavat Paramam Pumam
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham
Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagadanda Koti
Yasa Prabha Prabhavatu Jagadanda Kuti
Koti Swasesu Vasadadi Vibhuti Benam
Kotya Swashesha Vasudhadi Vibhuti
Tad Brahmaniskalam Ananta Ashesha Bhutam
Tad Brahmaniskalam Anantam Ashesha Bhutam
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham
Maya Hiyasya Jagadanda Satani Sute
Maya
Tad
Yasha
Vishaya Veda
Jagananda Satani
Jai Gunya Tad Vishaya Veda Vitayamana
Triguna Tad Vishaya Veda Vitaya
Sattva Valambi Parasatvam Visuddha Sattvam
Sarva Valambi Parastartam Visuddha
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham
Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasu
Ananda Chinmaya Rasad Mataya
Ya Praninam Pratifalam Smaratam Upetya
Ya Praninam Pratipalam Smaratam Upe
Lilayatena Bhuvanani Jayat Jayashram
Ilayitena Bhuvanani Jaya Jajastram
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Jajashram Goloka Namni Nijadamni Tale Chitasya
Golo Kanamni Nijadamni Tali
Devi Mahesa Haridama Sute Sutesu Tete Prabhava Nichaya Vitasya Tete Prabhava Nichaya Vitaschayena
Tete Prabhavani Jaya Vihita
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindamadi Purusham
Shristi Stati Pralaya Sadhana Saktireka
Siti Stiti Pralaya Sadhana Shakti
Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga
Chaye Vayasha Bhuvanani
Ichyanurupam Apiyasya Chichestatesa
Ichanurupam Apiyasha Chatistate
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindamadi Purusham
Shiram Yata Dadadi Vikara Vishesha Yoga
Kiram Yata Dhadi Vikara Vishesha Yoga
Sanjayate Naitata Prikadashti Heto
Sanjayate Nahitata Pritakasti
Yasambutam Apitata Samapaiti Karya
Yasam Prutam Apitata Samupaiti
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindamadi Purusham
Deeparchad Eva Hitasantaram Abhyupetya
Iparshi Eva Tanstataram
Deepayate Vivita Hetu Samanu Dharma
Dipayate Vivitae Samana Dharma
Yastadrik Eva Hicha Vishnu Taya Vibhati
Yastadi Eva Hicha Vishnu Taya Vibha
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindamadi Purusham Tamam
Yakarna Narna Vajale Bhajati Sma Yoga
Yakara Narna Vajale Vajatisma Yoga
Nidramananta Jagananda Saroma Kupaha
Nidram Ananta Jagananda Saroma Kupa
Adhara Shaktim Avalambya Param Swamurtim
Adhara Shatim Avalambya Param Samudhi
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindamadi Purusham Tamam
Yasyaika Nisvasitakala Matavalambya
Yasheka
Jivanti Loma
Nisvasitakala
Vilaja
Matavalam
Jivanti Loma Vilaja Jagananda Nataha
Jivanti Loma Vilaja Jagananda Nata
Vishnu Mahansa Yasya Kala Vishesho
Nur Mahan Sahiya Yasha Kala Visheshu
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindamadi
Asmani
Purusham
Tasma Vasmanya Tasma Sakalesa Nijesu Tejaha
Basman Yatasma Sakaleshu Nijesu
Swiyam Kiyat Prakatayat Apitadvadatra
Siyam Kiyat Prakatoyat Chapatita
Brahmaya Esa Jagananda Vidana Karta
Brahmaya Esha Jagananda Vidana
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindamadi Purusham Tamam
Yat Pada Palava Yugam Vinidaya Kumbha Dvandve Pranama Samayesa Dvandve Pranama Samayesa Ganadi Rajaha
Indre Pranama Samaye Jagannathi
Vignan Vihantam Alamasya Jagatrayasya
Vignam Vihantum Alamasya Jagat
Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Agnir Mahiga Ganamambu Marudisascha. Kalastatatma Manasitti Jagatrayani. Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Vishanti. Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Vishanti Yamcha. Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Yaschak Suresha Savita Sakala Grahanam. Raja Samasta Suramurti Rasesa Tejaha. Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrita Kalachakro. Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Dharmo Tapapa Nijaya Srutayastapamsi. Brahma Dikita Patagava Dayascha Jivaha. Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakata Prabhava. Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Yes Trindra Gopa Matavendra Mahoswakarma. Rupa Falabhajana. Bandhana Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti. Karmani Nirdhati Kintu Chabakti Bhajam. Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Yam Krodha Kama Sahaja Pranayadi Vitti. Vatsalya Moha Guru Gora Vasevya Bhava Hai. Sanchitya Tasya Sadrisim Tanamapurete. Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravu. Druma Bhumis Chintamani Ganamayi Toyam Amritam. Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Apivamsi Priya Saki. Chid Anandam Jyoti Param Apitad Asvatyam Apicha. Sayatra Siradi Bihi Shavati Surabi Vyascha Sumahan. Nime Sardakyo Vavrajati Nahiyatra Pitsamaya. Vajay Svita Dvipam Tamaham Iha Golokamityam. Vidantaste Santakshiti Virala Charakatipaye. Shri Ishopanishad Ki Jai. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate.
Om Purnam Ada Purnam Idam Purnam Udasate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vasisate.
Ishvaisham Idam Sarvam Jatkinja Jagatyam Jagat Tinutak Tena Punjitaha Magritaha Krishasviddanam.
Ishvaisham Idam Sarvam Jatkinja Jagatyam Jagat Tinutak Tena Punjita.
Kurvani Vahakarmani Jijiva Chekchatam Samaha Evam Twayi Nanyati Tosti Nakarma Lipite Nare.
Kurvan Eveya Karmani Jijiva Chekchatam Samaha Evam Twayi Manyahi Tosti Nakarma Lipite Nare.
Asurya Namate Loka Andena Tamasavritaha Tamste Pritya Vigachanti Eke Chatmahano Janaha.
Asurya Namate Loka Andena Tamasavritaha
Anichadika Manaso Javiyo Nena Devam Apravam Pravam Asad Tadavato Jnana Teti Tistat Tasmin Apamata Viswadadati.
Anadika Manaso Javiyo Nenam Deva Anupam Purvam Astat Tadavato Jnam Atiti Tistat Tasmin Apoma Ishradadati.
Tadejiti Tad Tad nejati tad dure tad vantike tad antarasya sarvasya tadu sarvasya sabayataha.
Tadejati nanajati tadure diva ajantike tad antarasya sarvasya tadu sarvasya abayata.
Yastu sarvani bhutani atmani eva nupasyati sarvabhutesu chatmanam tato na vijigupsate.
Yastu Savani Bhutani Atmani Eva Papsate Sarvabhuteshu Chatmanam Tatuna
Yasmin
Vijayukasate
sarvani bhutani atmeva bhut vijanataha tatrako mohakaha sukha ekatvam anupasyataha.
Yasmin Sarvani Bhutani Atmeva Bhut Vijayanata Tatra Kumahan Koshoka Advaram Anupapsata
Saprayagat chukamakayam avranam asnaviram sudam apapalvidam kavir manisi paribu swayambhu yatatat yutu rutan vyadadat jasvatipyaha samabhyaha.
Saparagya Chukram Akayam Avranam Azamintam Sudam Apapavidam Kavir Manasi Vidhu Swayambu Vitaya Jaturitam Yadacha Chavyasvya
Andam tamaha pravisanti ye vidyam upasyate tato bhuyavate tamo yayu vidyayam rataha.
Andam Tama Pravisanti Vidyam Upasate Tato Buya Iyati Tamo Ya Uvidya Yarataha
Anyadevahur vidyaya anyadahura vidyaya iti susrumadiranam yenastad vijachaksire.
Anyaliva
Vidyam cha
Vidya
vidyam cha
Yadawa Vidya Yati Shumadiranam Yenasta Vichachakshire
vidyam cha yasyastad vedabhayam saha avidyaya militum tidva vidyayam ritamasnute.
Vidyam cha Yas Tad Vedu Bayam Saha Avidyayam Rityum Tidva Vidyamritam Asmate
Antam tamaha pravisanti ye sambhutim upasyate tato bhuyavate tamo yayu sambhutam rataha.
Andam Tama Pravishanti Sambutim Upasate Tato Buya Ivate Tamo Ya Usambutyam Rataha
Anyadevahur sambhavat anyadahura sambhavat iti susrumadhiramam yenastad vichachakshire.
Anyaliva Usambhavat Anyad Aura Sambhavat Iti Shushumadiranam Yenatad Vichachakshire
Sambhutim cha vinasam cha yastad vedabhayam saha vinasena militum tidva sambhutam ritamastute.
Samutim Cha Vinashanam Cha Yastad Eva Dubya Yat Saha Vinasena Mrityam Tirva Sambutyam Ritam Asmate
Iranmayana patrena satyasya pitam pukam satpam pusam apavrinu satyadharma yadristaye.
Iranmaye Napate
Satyasya pitam yukam
Tatvam Pusham Avadru Satyadharma Satyai
Pusane kaseyama surya prajapatya vyuharasmin samahatejo yatte rupam kayanatamam tate pasyami yo savaso purushaha sohamasmi.
Pusane Kashati Yama Surya Prajapatya Viyusasmi Samutatejo Yate Rupam Kalyana Tamam Tate Pasyami Yosa Asu Purusho Sohasmi
Vayuranilam amritam adedam basmantam sariram om kratus smara kritam smara kratus smara kritam smara.
Vayuranelam Amritam Adidam Basmatam Shariram Om Kratush Marakitam Smaram Tat Kratush Marakita Smaram
Om Agnenaya Supatara Yasman Vishwani Deva Vayunani Vidvan Yo Dajmas Chuhuranamino Buyastam Te Nama Uktim Vidima Om Tat Sat.
Ovagne Naya Supata Naye Asma Vivani Deva Vayuna Vidam Yuyodya Asma Junanam Eno Ujistam Te Nama Uktim Videma
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7. And we're going to do, there's some things that I didn't finish discussing yesterday, so we're going to go over that, and then we'll go to text 15. So yesterday we were hearing some interesting things, and we covered many different points, but today we're going to hear about the real problem of human life, the one that most people cannot come to grips to and cannot control. Okay, so this is very precious information, and it gives deep understanding of why people have difficulty controlling their anger, lust, and greed, and how when they can't control these things, it contaminates everything they do, and it's impossible for them to be Krishna conscious. unless they meet a or several pure devotees and are able to have the humility and the wherewithal to surrender themselves and to be instructed in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, it's impossible. This lust, anger, and greed are too powerful, and they just are overwhelmed by them all the time, especially anger. So in the Canto 7, chapter 15, verse number 19, it says, because of greed for the sake of the senses, the spiritual strength, education, austerity, and reputation of a devotee or a brahmana who is not self-satisfied dwindle, and his knowledge gradually vanishes. So, you're talking about because of greed for the sake of the senses. In other words, meaning one is greedy for sense gratification. Right? And this happens usually at puberty, when a boy or girl reach about 11, 12, 13 years old. All their desires from previous life are reawakened, and they're overwhelmed by them, and they become attracted to illicit activities in the form of music and sense gratification and excitement and titillation of the senses, all these things. And they become overwhelmed by all this. And their unfulfilled desires from the previous life awaken in their mind. And so, because of greed for the sake of the senses, in other words, because becoming greedy for sense gratification, the spiritual strength, education, austerity, and reputation of a devotee or brahmana who is not self-satisfied dwindle, and his knowledge gradually vanishes. So, the key word here is self-satisfied. So in the previous verses, to verse 19, verse 16 says, one who is content and satisfied and who links his activities with the Supreme Personality of Godhead residing in everyone's heart enjoys transcendental happiness without endeavoring for his livelihood. Where is such happiness for a materialistic man who is impelled by lust and greed and who therefore wanders in all directions with a desire to accumulate wealth? And then it says, for a person who has suitable shoes on his feet, there is no danger even when he walks on pebbles and thorns. For him, everything is auspicious. Similarly, for one who is always self-satisfied, there is no distress. Indeed, he feels happiness everywhere. So, if you have a iPhone, let's say 12, and you find out that they're coming out with the iPhone 13. So you think, oh no, I don't want to, I got to get that 13 right away. You know. And then when they come out with the iPhone 14, the same person thinks, oh, I got to get the 14 right away. Even though the 13 works just fine, and the 12 works fine, and the 11 works fine, and the 10 works fine, but they have to get the new one, you see. So this is called greed. They have something that works just okay. It's just fine, you know. But no, they're not satisfied. That's the point. They're not satisfied. So similarly, one who is always self-satisfied, there's no distress. Indeed, he feels happiness everywhere. And then it says, my dear king, a self-satisfied person can be happy even with only drinking water. However, one who is driven by the senses, especially by the tongue and genitals, must accept the position of a household dog to satisfy his senses. So when it talks about a household dog, it means a person who's married and is very, very attached to family and attached to having the prestige of making a lot of money and having houses and filling the house full of gadgets and cars and boats and vacation homes and this and that. It's unending greed for sense gratification. Okay, so then we come to the verse today. Because of greed for the sake of the senses, the spiritual strength, education, austerity, and reputation of a devotee or brahmana who is not self-satisfied dwindle, and his knowledge gradually vanishes. So, although the money increases, the knowledge vanishes, and the self-satisfaction goes away, and knowledge also goes away. So then the next verse says, the strong bodily desires and needs of a person disturbed by hunger and thirst are certainly satisfied when he eats. Similarly, if one becomes very angry, that anger is satisfied by chastisement and its reaction. But as for greed, even if a greedy person has conquered all the directions of the world or has enjoyed everything in the world, still he will not be satisfied. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, in Bhagavad Gita 3.37, it is stated that lust, anger, and greed are the causes of the conditioned soul's bondage in this material world. Kama esa krodha esa rajaguna samudbhavan. When strong lusty desires for sense gratification are unfulfilled, one becomes angry. This anger can be satisfied when one chastises his enemy, but when there is an increase in lobha or greed, which is the greatest enemy caused by rajo guna, the mode of passion, how can one advance in Krishna consciousness? So it's saying that although anger confuses a person, makes them do foolish and sometimes drastic things, but it's saying here that greed is even worse than the anger. Sometimes you get angry, sometimes people kill other people because they get angry, right? But it's saying that greed is even worse than anger because there's no end to it. Anger can be satisfied by, winning, let's say. But greed is never satisfied. See? Just like there was once 4 young boys, and they left their village, and they decided that they wanted to become wealthy. So they started traveling. And somebody told them that there was this one mountain where if they could find this mountain, they could get all kinds of wealth. So they were determined to find this special mountain. Eventually they did. And when they started going up in the mountain, as they go, and it was a very high mountain, they came to a little bit of a plateau, and they saw that there was a lot of copper utensils. And they examined it, and there were a lot of copper utensils. And, copper has its value, right? So one of the boys said, I'm going to collect all this and take it back to my village, and I'll be able to sell it whenever I sell these copper things, whenever I have need for money, and I'm satisfied. But the other 3 said, well, okay, but this is a mountain where there's all wealth, so if you're satisfied, that's okay, you go. But we're going to keep going and see what else we can find. So they kept going, and they came to another place where they saw a lot of silver utensils. So the second boy said, wow, there's so many of these. And silver, of course, is worth more than copper. Why don't I collect as much as I can and take it back? Maybe you can there's so much that we can go all of us, And the other 2 said, no, because then we'll be competing with each other, in the village. You take the silver ones, we're going to keep going. So the other 2 kept going. And it went higher and higher in this mountain. It was getting a little dangerous. And they came to another place where there were a lot of golden ornaments and utensils. And they were really amazed, you know. So one said to the other, said, wow, let's just grab all this stuff and we'll go back and we'll have plenty of money, more than the others, and we'll be happy. And the fourth one said, no. I mean, you do it, you know. I mean, you take as many as you can, you know. I'm just fascinated by this mountain, and there must be something better than this. The one said, what do you mean better than this? This is gold. Come on, man. It's worth millions of dollars. Let's just grab as much as we can and take it back. He said, no, you take it. You know, I want to see something better. So the third boy took as many gold utensils and jewelry and things and went back. He was satisfied. So the fourth one kept going. He kept going and going. It was getting more and more dangerous, getting higher and higher. And he comes to a place and he sees a man a little bit in the distance, and it looks like something's on his head. So he's curious, you know. So he keeps going, and he approaches the man, and all of a sudden the thing on the man's head flies through the air, and it lands on his head, and it really hurts, and it's very heavy. And the other man said, oh, I'm so glad you came. This cursed wheel has been on my head for years because I was so greedy. I was not satisfied with copper or silver or gold, and I thought there would be something more, but there's only a curse here. And now you got it, and you freed me from the curse. Thank you very much, and I'm getting out of here as fast as I can. And all of a sudden, this boy has this heavy, very heavy thing, and it's turning slowly, and it's sort of like almost like grinding into his head. And he said, oh my God, what's going on here? And he's trying to take it off, and it doesn't go, and he got stuck and caught by his greed, you see. And now he has to wait for another greedy person to come. It could take years. It might take 1,000 years. Who knows? So we see how greed is very dangerous. It's even more dangerous than anger. So, however, Prabhupada says, when strong lusty desires for sense gratification are unfulfilled, one becomes angry. This anger can be satisfied when one chastises his enemy, but when there is an increase in lobha or greed, which is the greatest enemy caused by Rajoguna, the mode of passion, how can one advance in Krishna consciousness? In other words, if there's a greedy person, there's no way they're going to advance. If one is very greedy to enhance his Krishna consciousness, this is a great boon. Tatra lolam ekalam mulam. See, we read that verse the other day. This is, in that verse, Prabhupada got the name for Krishna consciousness. But anyway, that's that verse, and this is the third line of that verse that says that when one is greedy for Krishna consciousness, that actually is very good. And Prabhupada said, this is the best path available. So if one is very greedy to enhance his Krishna consciousness, this is a great boon. Tatra lolam ekalam mulam. This is the best path available. So instead of becoming greedy for money, wealth, prestige, we should become greedy for Krishna consciousness. Want more and more and more and more. So then the next verse says, O King Yudhisthira, many persons with varied experience, many legal advisors, many learned scholars, and many persons eligible to become presidents of learned assemblies fall down into hellish life because of not being satisfied with their positions. And purport by Srila Prabhupada. For spiritual advancement, one should be materially satisfied. For if one is not materially satisfied, his greed for material development will result in the frustration of his spiritual advancement. There are two things that nullify all good qualities. One is poverty. Daridra dosu guna rasinasi. If one is poverty-stricken, all his good qualities become null and void. Similarly, if one becomes too greedy, his good qualifications are lost. Therefore, the adjustment is that one should not be poverty-stricken, but one must try to be fully satisfied with the bare necessities of life and not be greedy. For a devotee, to be satisfied with the bare necessities is therefore the best advice for spiritual advancement. Learned authorities in devotional life consequently advise that one not endeavor to increase the number of temples and matas, or assemblies. Such activities can be undertaken only by devotees experienced in propagating the Krishna consciousness movement. All the acharyas in South India, especially Sri Ramanujacharya, constructed many big temples. And in North India, all the Goswamis of Vrindavana constructed large temples. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura also constructed big centers known as Gaudiya Matas. Therefore, temple construction is not bad provided proper care is taken for the propagation of Krishna consciousness. Even if such endeavors are considered greedy, the greed is to satisfy Krishna, and therefore these are spiritual activities. So we see the difference between a materialist who wants to acquire many things, even opening temples, and societies where people can come and like the Theosophical Society, and this society and that society. There's so many societies in the world. But that is because of material greed. It's not actually a pure thing. On the other hand, someone who wants to build temples where people can be trained in Krishna consciousness, that type of greed is actually good because it helps. It fills the, let's say, desire of Krishna. What is the desire of Krishna? The desire of Krishna is that all living entities come back to him. So the majority of the living entities are in the spiritual world. A small minority, like us, have revolted against Krishna, and we've come to the material world, and therefore we ignore Krishna and we become victims of material nature, which is controlled by the devatas. And in material nature, there's birth, there's old age, there's disease and death. And then there are three types of miseries. Miseries caused by this body, miseries caused by other persons, miseries caused by natural cataclysmic events. And there's lust, anger, greed, madness, illusion, and envy. And there are three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance, that condition us, or basically entrap us, keep us in the prison house of the material world. And then there's sex desire and greed and anger, all these things. So we are in a very bad position in this material world. And we're always harassed by the laws of material nature. And we cannot escape them. They are insurmountable. Birth, old age, disease, and death. You can't stop them. With all the contraceptive methods that they have nowadays, still the population is increasing. And then with all the medicines and hospitals they have, still people are dying. Right? And with all the powerful armies that they have, still they cannot control earthquakes, tsunamis, and hurricanes, and things like that. So no one can control birth, old age, disease, and death. These are laws of material nature. And the material nature is controlled under the control of the devas, who work under the control of Krishna. So in other words, and the material nature is actually spiritual, it's not material, because it's the inferior spiritual energy of Krishna. So it's impossible to overcome it. But yet, everyone's promising, by 2050, old age and disease and death will be optional. This is nonsense. This is complete nonsense. This is a lie. But yet, they make these promises. Of course, it's always in the future, right? And when you get there, they say, well, we almost reached it. Give us another 50 years and we'll reach it, you know. It's all nonsense. It's all pie in the sky. And because of that, stupid people believe this nonsense. But it clearly says in Bhagavad Gita, Daivihi sagunamai mama maya duratya. This material nature is impossible to overcome. So why try to overcome it? Rather, try to overcome lust, anger, and greed. That's what we should overcome. That's what we should control. Not try and control material nature because it's impossible. But it is possible through Krishna consciousness to control lust, anger, and greed. So then, it says, by making plans with determination, one should give up lusty desires for sense gratification. Making plans with determination. Just like, let's make a plan with determination to chant 16 good rounds every day. Right? And let's make a plan with determination to not engage in illicit sex. And let's make a plan with determination to eat only prasadam and nothing else. And let's make a plan with determination to go out on Sankirtan and to preach. And let's make a plan to come every day to the temple and hear the class. And let's make a plan to do all these activities that are called Krishna consciousness on a daily basis. Then we can overcome lusty desires for sense gratification. So here's a solution to control lusty desires for sense gratification. When you make a plan to engage in devotional service every day. Right? And similarly, by giving up envy, one should control anger. This is really interesting. Why do people become angry? Because they're envious of someone or something. Envious means you want this thing so badly. And not only once you get it, you're satisfied. You're only satisfied when you get it and nobody else has it. Right? You're the only one. So we see there are people like that. Like, for example, the British, they created a famine in Ireland to punish the Irish people who were always trying to revolt against them by so the favorite food in Ireland, the staple food of Ireland, at least in the 19th century, was potatoes. Have you ever seen Irish Eyes potatoes? You look on the boxes we have of potatoes, it said Irish Eyes. So someone from Ireland came to Washington State, opened a potato farm, because the Irish love potatoes, right? And so the British, they bought up all the potatoes in Ireland one year and stocked them. Either they bought them and stocked them in military warehouses, or where with people with guns protecting them so no one can get to them, or they destroyed some of the crop. Right? And this caused a tremendous famine. And many Irish people died, and many Irish people left Ireland and moved to the United States and to other countries. So the British did the same thing because it was so successful in Ireland in the 1850s. They did the same thing in Bengal during World War II, so that the young Bengali men would not join Subhash Chandra Bose's Indian army that was going to fight against the British and liberate India. And so they would join the Indian army and fight against the Subhash Chandra Bose and his army and the Japanese. So we see this technique of sequestering a precious commodity to cause pain and suffering and death to people. In the same way, you see sometimes the price of oil goes down and sometimes the price of oil goes up, right? And it's a little bewildering, you're buying oil, gasoline at $2 a gallon. All of a sudden, a couple months later, it's at $4 a gallon, right? That takes a big chunk of your money away. So all these things are tricks, games, manipulated by big-time greedy people. So in the purport to this verse, it says, similarly, by giving up envy, one can conquer anger. So envy means somebody has something that you don't have, and you want to get the same thing. So that's called jealousy. But when that's not enough, that you got the same thing, you want the other person to lose what they have, that's called envy. So in other words, even if you get the same thing, you're still not satisfied until the other person loses. So we see that Ravana was envious of Ram because Ravana already had hundreds of beautiful women, and the most beautiful woman was Mandodari, but that was not enough. When he heard about Sita Devi, he thought, oh, now I know why this Ramachandra is so powerful, because he has such a beautiful wife. If I take his wife away from him, then he'll become a wimp, and he'll just wither away. See, this is the way demons think. Of course, that was wrong, what he was thinking. Obviously, Sita was the most beautiful woman, but that was not the cause of his strength. So this is called projecting your foibles on another person. So he's thinking, look, I'm powerful because I got all these wives, and they're very beautiful. But he's got a wife that's more beautiful than my wives. That's why he's so powerful. No, that's not why he's so powerful. See, he's so powerful because he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It has nothing to do with having a beautiful wife, right? So this is the way demons think, right? And this is called projecting your limitations on another person, right? So similarly, by giving up envy, one should conquer anger. By discussing the disadvantages of accumulating wealth, one should give up greed. And by discussing the truth, one should give up fear. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura has suggested how one can conquer lusty desires for sense gratification. One cannot give up thinking of women, or women thinking of men, for thinking in this way is natural. Even while walking on the street, one will see so many women. However, if one is determined not to live with a woman, even while seeing a woman, he will not become lusty. If one is determined not to have sex, he can automatically conquer lusty desires. The example given in this regard is that even if one is hungry, if on a particular day he is determined to observe fasting, he can naturally conquer the disturbances of hunger and thirst. If one is determined not to be envious of anyone, he can naturally conquer anger. Similarly, one can give up the desire to accumulate wealth simply by considering how difficult it is to protect the money in one's possession. If one keeps a large amount of cash with him, he is always anxious about keeping it properly. Thus, if one discusses the disadvantages of accumulating wealth, he can naturally give up business without difficulty. So there was once a relatively poor Brahmana, but he lived not too far away from a very rich Baniya, or businessman. And one day the businessman came to the little hut of the Brahmana who was living with his wife. He knocked on the door, and the Brahmana opened the door, and then he saw the businessman. He knew who he was, and he greeted him. And the businessman said, "Can I speak to you, please?" He said, "Yes, what is it?" He said, I don't trust anybody. I don't even trust my wife and kids. And I have a lot of money. You know that, right? I said, "Yeah, I've heard that." And he said, "I'm going to go on a long trip. But since I can't trust anyone, I want you to protect my money while I'm gone, because I trust you." The Brahmin said, but I mean, he said, well, thank you very much for saying that, but I mean, I've never had any money in my life. How do you know I'll be able to protect your money? He said, no, I know you'll do it because you're an honest person. Your whole life you've been an honest person. I know about you. I've watched you. I've heard about you. So I'll bring my money. It's one big box, it's full of jewels and other things, and you can keep it in your house. So the Brahmana was not sure about this. He didn't ask his wife, by the way, And he said, okay, sir, I want to always help others, So late one night, the Brahmana would always take rest early to wake up early, So late one night, he hears this soft knocking on his door. And he was not like a heavy sleeper, so he sort of wakes up and he looks out the window and he sees the man in the dark, So he opens the door and said, how come you're here so late? It's like, 1 o'clock in the morning. Shh, he said, shh, don't make any noise. I brought the box for you. He said, what box? He said, the one with all the money in it. Oh, okay. What should I do with it? I said, well, you have to keep it while I'm away. I'll be away for a month or two. Oh, okay. Let me have it. He said, no, it's too heavy. You have to help me carry it. So they both sort of move it in, to this house. And the Brahmin said, well, okay. He said, shh, don't talk so loud. Someone might hear. He said, oh, I'm sorry, And he said, so I'll see you in a month or two or maybe longer. And I trust you. You're an honest man. And he leaves. So the Brahmana closes the door, and his wife, notices that he's not in bed. And so he says, what was that? Who was that? And he said, well, it's that rich guy that lives over there in that big house. And he said, what does he want with you? He said, well, he said he doesn't trust anyone, and he only trusts me. He said, what? You never even talked to the guy. So I know. I don't know why he said that. He said, so what does that have to do with you? Well, he brought this box here. I said, what box is that? He said, this box here. So what's in that box? Said, well, there's a lot of money, he said, in the box. There's jewelry. And he said, are you crazy? Someone would kill us for this if they find out. He said, well, he kept saying, shh, don't say anything. So, the wife said, this is crazy. She said, if somebody finds out, they'll come and kill us and take it. He said, wow, I didn't think about that. I never had any money in my life, so I didn't have to worry about it. He said, no. Look, you better stay awake now and keep watch. Just make sure nobody comes. And I'll take some rest. And then later on, I'll get up and I'll watch and you take some rest. He said, but how are we going to wake up for Mangala Aarti? He said, what do you mean wake up for Mangala Aarti? We have to be careful now. We could be killed. He said, okay. So he has to stay up, all night long while his wife is sleeping. Then she wakes up, and then she's looking also. And then she said, are you crazy? He said, what do you mean? You are opening the curtain like this, someone could see you looking outside. He says, you have to keep the curtain almost closed and just look like this. He said, wow, really? It was hard enough looking the way I was, this is going to make it even harder. So, okay, you go to sleep now. I'll do like that, So she watches it, So he misses Mangala Aarti, and they're so worried about the money. And then the wife says, look, we got to put this under our bed. He said, well, it's pretty heavy. He said, no, I'll help you, She already has a bad back. So they carry the thing in the morning, and they shove it under their bed. And then later on, before the evening, the wife was thinking, I don't know if that's such a good idea, keeping it under the bed. Because if someone finds out it's under the bed, they'll kill both of us to get to it. He said, yeah, I never thought of that. So what do you think we should do? She said, I think tonight we should quietly, around 1 or 2 o'clock, take it out and bury it in the yard. So at least they won't come into the house to try and get it. He said, bury it? He said, how do you bury something? I've never dug a hole before. He said, well, you have to get a shovel. He said, I don't have a shovel. He said, go borrow one from someone. well, if I borrow it, they might ask me what it's for. And she said, yeah, you're right. Well, you have to buy one. He said, well, how can I buy one? I don't have any money. She said, well, take some money out of the box. She said, no, I can't do that. The man kept saying I'm an honest guy. I can't even take one penny. She said, well, then you have to just, I don't know, dig with your hand. He said, oh my God, I never thought money could cause so many problems. So that night he has to go out and dig a hole with his hands, right? And the wife is next to him, and she's saying, shh, don't make any noise doing this. Oh, how can I not make any noise? There's rocks here and this thing. Anyway, he digs a hole, and she keeps saying, it's got to be deeper, it's got to be deeper. He says, we've been here already 3 hours. How much deeper can it? He said, no, it's got to be deeper. No one can understand it. So, he covers it, and the wife says, now you got to get some leaves and cover it over it. Otherwise, people will see the ground has been disturbed here. So he has to collect some. So they're up all night. And then the wife said, the sun is coming up. We got to hurry up and, get back into the house so no one sees us. So anyway, so they get back in the house, and the wife said, okay, so it's your turn to watch. He said, what do you mean watch? We don't have to watch anything. It's out there now. Said, no, someone might find it. He said, oh, okay. So he didn't sleep at all, right? So this goes on for 3-4 days. Finally, the Brahmana said, look, this is crazy. I can't chant. I can't say my mantras. I can't eat. I can't even pass stool. I'm so worried. He said, this has never happened to me before. So she said, well, what are we going to do? She said, I know what I'm going to do. He said, I'm taking that damn box back. She said, but he's not there. He said, I don't care he's not there. I give it to his wife, and I tell him, don't ever, your husband doesn't trust you. I'm going to tell the truth. So he goes, he takes it back the next day. The wife comes to the door, and she said, what is it? He said, I have this box. This belongs to you. She said, what box is that? He said, your husband gave it to me. And he tells her the whole story, and she's shocked. And he said, and I don't want to ever, you or your husband, or anybody come to my door again. And he goes back. So this is the problem with greed. And what happened, the Brahmana was a happy man, but as soon as he got that box in his house, it ruined everything. And he realized, I have to get rid of this right away. He was determined. So, by discussing spiritual knowledge, one can conquer lamentation and illusion. By serving a great devotee, one can become prideless. By keeping silent, one can avoid obstacles on the path of mystic yoga. And simply by stopping sense gratification, one can conquer envy. So, I'm not going to continue anymore, but there's a lot more wisdom like this. But we see this lust, anger, and greed, and envy just destroy a person. And here is very simple explanation of how to overcome these things. But it's not simply as simple as this. One must accept bona fide guru to actually become determined to overcome these type of negative influences on one's life. Okay, so we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? So this is Canto 7, Chapter 15, verses. There's a whole series of verses, starting from verse 16 and going to near the end of the chapter. It's all full of wisdom, how to overcome these negative influences in one's life. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. We have to learn to be satisfied. Huh?
It's a wonderful topic to meditate.
Yeah.
Greed comes in any form, subtle form as well.
Oh yeah, it's unlimited. Unlimited. And look what happened to those 4 boys, you know. The fourth boy, it ruined his life. He was not satisfied. The other 3 became satisfied. He was not satisfied. You want to chant?
Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Pada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma
Bandho Mui Savdhana Mate
Bandho Mui Savdhana
Bandho Mui Savdhana Mate
Bandho Mui Savdhana Mate
Jahara Prasade Bhai Bhavaturiya Jai Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Aite Krishna Prapti Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chite Te Kuriya Aikha और ना कोरी हो मने आशा
और ना कोरी मने आशा
और ना कोरी हो मने आशा
और ना कोरी
गुरु चरणे रति ऐसे उत्तम गति
ऐसे उत्तम गति
जे प्रसादे पूरे सर्व आशा प्रसादे पूरे सर्व आशा प्रसादे पूरे सर्व चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से चक्षुदान चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्म जन्मे प्रभु से ही
चक्षुदान दिला जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जहा होते अविद्या विनाश जते
भक्ति जाते अविद्या विनाश सजे
प्रेम भक्ति जहा होते अविद्या विनाश जते
भक्ति जहा होते अविद्या विनाश सजे
वेदे गाय जहार चरितो वेदे गाय जहार चरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदन जनर बंधु
लोकना लोकेर जीवाना लोकनाथ लोकेर जीवाना प्रभु तोरो दया देह मोरे पाद छया
प्रभु पुरा दया दया मोरे पद जय
प्रभु तोरो दया देह मोरे पाद छया
प्रभु पुरा दया दया मोरे पद जय
प्रभु तोरो दया देह मोरे पाद छया प्रभु तोरो दया देह मोरे पाद छया एबे जगु त्रिभुवना एबे एबे जगु त्रिभुवना एबे प्रभु पादोइलो शरण जय प्रभु पादा जय प्रभु पादा जय प्रभु पादा जय प्रभु पादा जय जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामीति नामिने नमः विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामीति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौर भक्त वृंद जय Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parajikacharya Satara Satara Shishi Shimari Grace Iti Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Rantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Shri Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samkunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Nitai Gaura Premananda. All glories to the assembled. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavana Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutili Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami. Namaste Saraswati Devi. The lotus feet of our spiritual master, the only way by which I can obtain the pure devotional service. I bow down his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet to perfection fulfills all desires.
He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates, and by him ignorance is destroyed. Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, the Lord and master of all. O Loknath Goswami, master, be merciful unto me. Give me the shade of your lotus feet. Give me his